Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 news. Major developments in terms of team personnel over the last few days. All the Red Bull drama is going on, but Ferrari is still trying to prepare for Lewis Hamilton's arrival next season. They have not had the best last couple of months, but Loic Serra is joining from Mercedes, along with apparently many other individuals as well, many of which apparently formerly worked under Serra, potentially at Mercedes itself. Also interesting rumours as to how they're going to restructure their technical department. The newy rumours have died down over the last couple of weeks, so enter the conversation Mike Elliott, the man that was effectively fired by Mercedes after the failure of the Zero Pod for the second year they tried it in 2023. He might be back in business working with Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new. Sorry about the slightly underwhelming camera quality today. Forgot my normal one. It is what it is. Summer break, of course, is in action. That means no development on the cars over the next couple of weeks. They can still do some things, but basically it is a shutdown as it is over the winter period where the engineers actually get a little bit of rest. Before we talk about that though, I wanted to discuss a little bit on the McLaren situation and what you guys think about the way this team has been trending this year, the way this driver pairing has been trending this year, because like over the last couple of races Piastri has done an excellent job, but I still think it's a bit too early to say that, oh yeah, Piastri now is the #1 driver or anything like that. Still, to me, in terms of pure quality pace and race pace especially, Lando still is the guy, but there are elements of Piastri's character, his maybe like mental game effectively, and even arguably his racecraft, which is stronger than Norris, I would say, right now. So they're a very balanced pairing as it presently stands, and Norris frankly should have done better over the last few rounds than he has done. He was actually quite honest with Sky Sports and others about this, that look, he's just simply made too many mistakes over the last few rounds, saying yeah, I've given away a lot of points recently because of stupid stuff. And I think maybe he's starting to realise, maybe not starting to realise, I think this is probably a known thing by all drivers, right? But many drivers, they look at the Hamiltons when Hamilton was dominating in the great Mercedes cars, they look at Verstappen when he's dominating in cars like the RB19 and say, well, if I was in that car, I'd be able to do exactly the same thing. But I think, you know, some drivers underestimate, and maybe Lando's one of these drivers, I don't know. I think Lando's a good guy, but I think he's been on the side of kind of being like, well, you know, if I was in that car, I'd be winning everything as well. But you've still got to be there to execute, right? And this is the point. Lando, on average, has probably had the fastest car over the last few rounds. Not as dominant as the RB19, nowhere near. Not as dominant as someone like the W11. But every, you know, the Hamiltons, the Verstappens of this world, they make very few mistakes. They turn up every single weekend. They pretty much always maximise the performance of the car, and that's how you win the championships, right? Lando should be, there's no doubt, and he knows this himself, in a much closer championship battle than he is. This should be championship on, but as it stands, it's just so hard to imagine that Lando can win this championship. Max's lead is too great, and there just isn't probably enough time to catch it up. It's possible, but it's still very unlikely. But if Lando had executed as he should have done over the last, let's say, 7 races of the season, then we'd be in a very different position, right? So yeah, Lando says a lot of stupid stuff, mistakes on my side, bad starts, probably trying too hard, paying the price. So I think it's a learning curve for Lando really to realise like what it actually takes to compete consistently at the very highest level, and it isn't maybe as easy even if you've got the car as it appears from the outside in. And it may no longer be so easy for McLaren every weekend. I mean, they've had many opportunities. They did get the 1-2 of course in Hungary, but outside of that, it's now been Mercedes really piling the pressure on, and Hamilton even said after Spa, yeah, get ready for the second half of the season because the feeling is for Mercedes, there's more upgrades that are going to work in the pipeline. Talking about Red Bull though, because their upgrades have not especially worked that well this season, they are going to bring a special livery for Singapore. Of course, the only track on the calendar, pretty sure as it stands, that Max has not won at. And, well, this year it looked like the way the season started, that was possibly going to change. Right now, is Max favoured to win in Singapore? Absolutely not, right? I mean, he couldn't win there with the RB19. Doubtful he's going to be able to get the job done with the RB20 based on the way things presently look. However, the car will look different there. You can actually vote on this if you want to. I kind of like the red one just because it's a bit different to what they've run before. Now let's talk about Red Bull, of course. Jonathan Wheatley, their sporting director, is departing the team at the end of the season. Pretty, well, very unexpected. In the grand scheme of things, over the last couple of months, this has been coming, and we saw the repercussions of it just the other day. This was interesting, though, Red Bull talking about exactly what's next, right? How they're going to replace Wheatley, what the plan is going to be over there, really, in terms of bringing up somebody else, because the rumour has it they're going to promote internally. They're not going to hire somebody else, which makes sense, of course. I mean, look, Horner's got to put his money where his mouth is in terms of, oh, yeah, we've still got a strong organisation, nothing to worry about here, guys, still got lots of talent in this team, which I'm sure is true. In the pit stop crew, you know, very good over there. Whereas the rest of the team, there are still some questions on whether, you know, how much talent they may have lost over the last few years, of course, the Newey departure, the Wheatley departure doesn't really, obviously even Rob Marshall, of course, he's now joined McLaren over the last couple of years, and that seems to have worked out rather well for them. So this is what happens. Dominance never lasts forever. It's simply a function of the sport. But as we see, Wheatley's going to go. Somebody else is going to come in instead. There are rumours of maybe, what about Giampiero Lambiase? Of course, he's the race engineer for Max Verstappen, and there's been some discussion. Could he come in and also be the new sporting director of the team? Now, would that mean that he would step away from his responsibilities with Verstappen? Probably not. I mean, I would imagine that if he did this, he'd probably split roles, as he does as the head of race engineering anyway. So possibly he could do both, but there is, if you're putting GP into that like sporting director role, it kind of implies to me that you don't have too many options. Not like GP wouldn't be a good option, but it's like, if he's, head of basically race side engineering and he's Max's actual race engineer, and then you're saying, hey, GP, do you mind like being the sporting director as well? Like, that's quite a lot on his plate, and it kind of implies that there's no clear replacement there for Wheatley. At the same time, of course, their upgrades aren't working as intended. There are growing concerns about their development trajectory. The rumour has it with Red Bull, they do have upgrades planned after the break. They will arrive over like Singapore, even into like Austin, I think. So there's a couple of rounds they're going to bring upgrades, but there's nothing like crazy in the works. I think it's kind of interesting for Red Bull, really, because at the start of the season, I'm sure that 5-6 races in, and of course we've discussed over the last couple of days what may have happened after 6-7 rounds of the season as to their competitiveness, because it doesn't seem to me that what's happened this season is just other teams catching up overnight. Feels to me that there's more to it than that, but intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below regardless. But at that point of the season, they'd have been very confident, Red Bull. Oh, great. I mean, we're going to dominate this year. And to be fair, they are, right? I mean, Verstappen is going to win the drivers, I'm pretty sure. They're probably not going to win the constructors, but, Max is still going to hold on, I think, to the Drivers' Championship. But at 7 races into the season, they would have probably planned out their development trajectory all towards 2025, right? Because at that point, they will have firmly believed they were winning both championships, no problem at all. All of a sudden, 7 more races on, it's a different story. So do they now take some of that development budget back from next year's car to this year's car? Or do they say, well, Max is going to hold on anyway, and the driver on the constructors is going to be a big challenge because we've kept Checo in the car for some reason. So let's see how that goes. Because it doesn't seem like they're going to bring as many upgrades. That's my point, right? Mercedes have obviously committed a lot of resource this year to the development of the W15 during the season, and it's worked spectacularly so. McLaren are doing the same. Red Bull may not be, and that may be based on a plan they made at the start of the season when things were looking rather different in terms of competitiveness to where they are today. And even Pierre Wache, there's been lots of talk about this really, right? Because Wache is the man over the last couple of years that Christian Horner has been like, he's the top dog, he's the guy that's really leading up this technical team. And there are rumours that Newey felt somewhat frustrated, or at least somewhat disappointed that it didn't seem like Red Bull valued him as maybe much as he thought that he deserved to be valued, and probably does deserve to be valued based on the evidence. But, Red Bull were talking about, it's not just about Newey, we've got a widespread technical team led by Pierre Wache, got Enrique Balbo over there, all these other top guys as well. I think it's Ben Waterhouse, is it, that's also involved in that technical part of the team. But there were rumours that there were some elements of this RB20 that Newey and Wache disagreed on, and Wache is kind of like the top guy. I mean, Newey was the CTO, but effectively, in some sense, like a consultant to the team. Wache made the call on certain things that Newey wasn't so happy with, and, well, look where we are today would be the read that many might have. So, and then he goes on to say, I don't even know if our car has a strong point anymore. We've improved a lot in the medium speed and slow corners compared to last year, but in the high speed corners, we're actually worse than last year. Maybe not in terms of, like, absolute numbers, but in terms of relatively to the competition, they've taken a step backwards. And he says, like, last year, they obviously weren't also perfect over the curbs. It was a problem at some tracks, namely such as Singapore, where they struggled with the setup, but last year they could seemingly get away with it because they were so good in so many other areas. But he says, yeah, we've not improved that problem as we expected we might. And that is also a concern for next year, because if their plan was last year to make sure their car was going to be great over the curbs this year, and in some sense it's worse, does that mean that they're going to be able to fix it next year? I don't know. Doesn't necessarily give me too much confidence if I was working for Red Bull. And then Wache says, look, we've got to turn it around and ask how close we can come to the competition. In recent weeks, we haven't had the fastest car. Imagine a Red Bull employee, let alone their technical director, saying something like that. even like, 4 months ago, 3-4 months ago, that would have been basically inconceivable. Certainly 12 months ago with what we saw last season. But let's talk about Ferrari, because they have been on average the 4th fastest car. And I mean, look, they're going to try and get back to the top, but as of late, they took a nosedive after their upgrades that didn't really work in Barcelona, didn't really work in Imola, of course, as well. They have upgrades in the pipeline. They expect to correct their mistakes from earlier in 2024, but it is not easy for them to achieve this. They need their upgrades to work absolutely as intended, because they chased downforce with their most recent packages, and they produced the downforce. The problem is they also produced the porpoising, right? The bouncing was back, and I didn't expect to see it in year 3 of these regulations, but still, it's a natural phenomena with these cars. If you try and push too hard, you are going to run into that natural effect of the floor stalling, the car bouncing up again, certainly through some of the high-speed corners where there's camber on the track, where the track's a bit bumpy, not perfectly even. Incredibly difficult to simulate, incredibly challenging calculations. It's impressive how many of the teams have got on top of this over the last couple of years, but still some teams will be riding the line on that one. But then the rumour comes in as to what's going to happen in 2026, and also to some degree for 2025, because Lewis Hamilton's joining Ferrari. He seems to be back on great form. I mean, Hamilton's performances over the last 3-4 weekends have been nothing short of stellar. And it does seem to feel like as soon as you give Hamilton a car that's, in position to potentially fight for race wins or is pretty much on the pace of the leaders, you're going to see the best version of Hamilton. You're going to see some great race management, and you're going to see some race victories, as we've seen over the last few weekends for the first time in a couple of years since Mercedes have actually had now a competitive car again. But Ferrari, they've kind of fallen away. Now, I don't think Hamilton regrets his decision. In some sense, Mercedes may regret their decision to not give Hamilton what he wanted. I don't know. That was the talking point, that Hamilton wanted to stay at Mercedes, but they wouldn't give him an ambassadorial role. They wouldn't commit to him for a 2-year deal. They wanted him to just sign a 1-year extension. Hamilton was like, look, Ferrari are Ferrari, and they're offering me all of these other things, and I don't know who's going to be more competitive in 2026 between Ferrari and Mercedes, but it's worth the punt. And I think that was probably fair enough under Fred Vasseur as well. And Ferrari have required the signing of other top engineers, such as Loic Serra, a man who worked very closely with Hamilton for a couple of years, and rumour has it was in quite some disagreement really with the way that Mercedes developed the W14. And interestingly enough, though, there was one man who may have been responsible for that, who might be joining the boys. But so Loic Serra is joining Ferrari. He arrives on October the 1st. The interesting thing, though, that this article talks about is that apparently he's already working on the car. Now, I didn't really know this was like a possibility, but apparently gardening leave is kind of not, well, it exists, but apparently there are ways around this, right? So of course, Enrico Cardile left the team to go to Aston Martin the other week. Serra's taking on various roles, head of chassis performance engineering, this type of stuff, and of course they're restructuring the technical team as a result. This is interesting though. Serra knows his stuff, and listen up, he won't start working at Ferrari in October. He's already been working there for a while, even if not at full capacity, because it's quite easy to get around the gardening leave and make your contribution ahead of time. So yeah, it seems like he can kind of, and apparently he's already working, Serra, on the upgrades that they're about to bring in a couple of months. So not even just for 2025, Serra's already working on the car for this year and for next year as well. So that's pretty exciting for Ferrari. And also they go on to say Ferrari has recruited several engineers who are little known in the media, but specialised in this field, many of whom have worked under Loic. So, potentially some Mercedes guys coming along for the ride as well. The second piece of the puzzle here, and this is reported today by Motorsport Italy as at least a possibility to consider on the return of Mike Elliott. So this is Mike Elliott, right? In some ways a controversial character over the last couple of seasons, because he was former Mercedes technical director when James Allison stepped away to work on the boat projects and became the CTO. Then, after the W14 was a disaster at that first test in Bahrain, Toto Wolff was on the phone to James Allison saying, hey, you're going to come back here. And what they effectively did is swap roles. Mike Elliott became the CTO, James Allison became the technical director again, and then Elliott was maybe not exactly fired, but effectively they forced Elliott out, it seemed like, and he decided to leave. There were even rumours he was going to go to Alpine at some point. But look, he obviously made some mistakes in the way that he managed that team on the production of the W14. But it's not worth taking away from the fact that Mike Elliott was a phenomenally important part of that Mercedes aerodynamic technical team when they had all their dominant cars throughout the hybrid era. Then he ends up leading that team, and I'm not sure, to me, he was as good a leader as a guy like James Allison will be, even if you're not just considering the technical aspect and like their talent, as it were, as an engineer, but like just in terms of personality, I think Allison is a far more inspiring leader than Elliott is, in my opinion. So maybe that was part of it, I don't know. The reality is, Elliott's obviously a talented and very smart guy, and Lewis Hamilton has made that very clear in his part as well. When Elliott left, he was talking about how, important Elliott was to the team for many years. So, look, someone made a mistake with the zero pod thing. Certainly keeping it for 2023 was an error, although still Mercedes say, well, it wasn't really about the zero pods, it was about other things. But clearly Elliott paid the price on some level for what's happened in 2023 with the W14, but now here we are with the W15, and, it seems like James Allison has turned the whole ship around. But the rumour has it that, this Mr. X who they're bringing in to potentially replace Enrico Cardile, especially now the Newey rumours have died down to some degree, is potentially Mike Elliott. That's what they're talking about here, and like they talk about how he messed up the whole zero pods, but nonetheless, one mistake doesn't define a career, and there is an argument to say that Mike Elliott should and could be welcomed at Maranello alongside Loic, Serra, alongside Hamilton. And look, I wouldn't necessarily describe that as like the dream team or whatever in the way that Ferrari had with Schumacher, etc. back in the day with Brawn and with Todd and everything like that. But still, I mean, having Serra from Mercedes, having Elliott from Mercedes, having Hamilton from Mercedes, and potentially others as well, seems like a pretty good start to a technical development team. It may not be Adrian Newey, but it's at least something to think about. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Just one final kind of funny thing to mention here that was put on the Reddit today. These are the time penalties given out this season. You can debate whether there should have been more of this. Of course, many thought that Verstappen should have got another penalty in Hungary, but he didn't. So few drivers with no penalties, few drivers with some, but it's just pretty funny to see how, like, Hamilton, for example, had one for crossing the line at pit entry back in Austria, right, and one for speeding in the pit lane. So there's a couple of drivers with one penalty, a couple of drivers with two penalties, and then you got Kevin Magnussen up here at 10. So it was actually pretty impressive, right? He had four penalties this season for leaving the track and getting an advantage, 3 for causing a collision, 1 for entering the pits during a safety car period and not changing tyres, 1 for a false start, and 1 for leaving the track without a justifiable reason multiple times. So sensational stuff for Magnussen, and he's not going to be in the sport unfortunately next year, but very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.